The crystalline spires of the Zeltharian observation deck hummed with quiet efficiency. Commander Vexel adjusted the long-range sensors, scaled fingers dancing across holographic controls as Earth rotated slowly on the main display. The blue and green planet looked peaceful from this distance, but the sensors told a different story. Another primitive world reaches the nuclear threshold, announced observer Kethmer, her voice carrying the bored tone of someone who had witnessed this scenario countless times. She stretched her long limbs and yawned, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Shall we begin the standard extinction countdown?" Vexel nodded, making notes in the galactic database with practiced ease. His claws clicked against the datapad as he entered information. Species designation: human. Predicted lifespan post-nuclear discovery: 200 to 400 local years. Standard pattern: they'll likely destroy themselves within 5 centuries. He paused and looked at the readings again. Actually, this species shows unusual aggression levels. I'm revising my estimate to 150 years maximum. The observation station had been monitoring Earth for decades, watching as the humans developed from simple tool users to spacefaring beings. The Zeltharians had seen it all before. Every species followed the same pattern. They discovered fire, then metals, then electricity, then nuclear power. And then they destroyed themselves. It was as predictable as the orbit of planets. "Look at them," Kethmer said, pointing at the screen showing major human cities. "They build these massive settlements, pack millions of their kind together, then give themselves the power to destroy it all in minutes. It's almost beautiful in its stupidity." Vexel pulled up historical data from other worlds. The Core 3 lasted 89 years after nuclear discovery. The Mythians managed 234 years. Both followed identical patterns: first a period of fear and restraint, then gradual escalation, then total war. He studied the human data streams. These humans are already showing signs of the final phase: multiple nation-states, competing ideologies, resource scarcity. On Earth, Dr. Minho Park stared at the mushroom cloud rising over Seoul through his laboratory window. The morning had started like any other. He had been working on a new water purification system, hoping to help the drought-stricken regions of Asia. Now, as he watched the distant explosion bloom against the sky, he knew his work might be the last thing he ever completed. The Third World War had begun with a single missile. North Korea had finally acted on years of threats. Within hours, the entire Korean peninsula was burning. China had responded with overwhelming force. Russia had moved to protect its interests. America had honored its treaties, and now the world was ending. Minho grabbed his emergency bag and ran toward the university's bomb shelter. Around him, other scientists and students were doing the same. The streets filled with screaming people. Cars abandoned as electromagnetic pulses disabled electronics across the city. In a bunker beneath the ruins of what had once been Busan, engineer Unikim worked frantically to complete the underground shelter systems that might save a fraction of their species. She had been working on the project for 3 years, ever since the government had quietly begun preparing for the worst. "How many can we save?" asked Dr. Sunho Lee, the project director. His face was grim as he watched the status reports flooding. "In from around the world? Maybe 50,000 across all the shelters," Yuna replied, not looking up from her calculations. "If we're lucky, and the systems hold." She paused, wiping sweat from her forehead. "The surface will be uninhabitable for decades, maybe longer." The bunker shook as another bomb detonated somewhere above them. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the lights flickered. Yuna's hands never stopped moving across her control panels, making final adjustments to the life support systems. "The children's section is ready," reported Nurse Morancho. "We have space for 800 minors, plus their essential caregivers." Her voice cracked slightly. So many families, torn apart. Above them, the war raged for 72 hours. When the bombing finally stopped, the silence was more terrifying than the explosions had been. The Zeltharians watched it all, recording every moment of destruction for their vast archives of failed civilizations. They had cameras in orbit, sensors monitoring radiation levels, listening devices, picking up the final transmissions from dying cities. "Excellent documentation," Vexel noted with satisfaction. This will make a fine addition to the Extinction Studies Department. The humans showed remarkable creativity in their final phase, using orbital platforms, underwater launches, even converted civilian spacecraft. Kethmer was already preparing her report. Total casualties estimated at 3.2 billion in the first week. Surface radiation levels will prevent recovery for approximately 200 years. A standard pattern confirms species self-termination through nuclear warfare. But something was different this time. The sensors detected power signatures from underground. Locations, organized communications between survivor groups. Signs of coordinated rebuilding efforts. Interesting, Vexel murmured. Some persist in shelters. This could extend our observation period considerably, made a note in the database. Recommend continued monitoring. Subject species shows unusual resilience, as neither observer realized. They were watching the birth of something entirely new. Something that would remember being watched during its darkest hour. Something that would not forgive. 50 years had passed since the first bombs fell. The Earth's surface was still a wasteland of twisted metal and radioactive glass, but deep. Underground, something remarkable was happening. The Zeltharian monitoring stations continued their vigil over the scarred planet below, their sensors detecting signs of life that should not have existed. Fascinating observer, Kethmer noted, reviewing the latest data streams with growing interest. She had been watching this planet for half a century now, and the humans continued to surprise her. Small pockets of humans persist in underground settlements. Most unusual, typically, species fragments scatter and fade within decades of global catastrophe. Her scaled fingers moved across the control panel, bringing up detailed scans of the underground networks. What she saw defied all their previous observations. Instead of small, desperate groups fighting over scraps, the humans had built entire cities beneath the ruins of their world. Commander Vextel joined her at the observation deck, his ancient eyes studying the readings. In my 4,000 years of monitoring primitive species, I have never seen anything like this, he admitted. They should be extinct by now. Radiation alone should have finished them decades ago. The data showed interconnected tunnel systems, spanning continents. Massive power generators hummed deep in the Earth's crust. Agricultural zones produced food using artificial sunlight. Most shocking of all, the human population was actually growing. They're not just surviving, Kethmer observed, her voice filled with scientific curiosity. They're thriving. Look at these energy readings. They're producing more power now than they were before the war. In the depths of New Busan Shelter, Council Leader Jin Ho Lee stood before a massive viewing screen showing the sprawling underground city. 50,000 people lived here now, far more than the original refugees who had fled the burning surface. Children who had never seen real sunlight played in the hydroponic gardens. Engineers worked on machines that would have seemed impossible decades ago. We are the last inheritors of Earth, Jinho announced to the assembled crowd. His voice echoed through the vast chamber carved from solid rock. Every death above ground must have meaning. We will not merely survive, we will remember, and we will rebuild. The crowd murmured their agreement. These people had been shaped by loss in ways the Zeltharians could not understand. They had watched their world burn from below, listening to the screams and explosions through thick concrete and steel. That experience had changed them, made them harder and more determined than any previous generation of humans. The memorial wall has been completed, announced archivist Min Seok Park. Behind him stood a massive black wall covered with names. Every human who had died in the war. There were over 3 billion names etched in gold letters, each one representing a life cut short. We will never forget what was taken from us. In the geothermal plants deep beneath Mount Fuji's ruins, engineer Hai-Jin Cho worked alongside her team in the blue glow of experimental fusion reactors. The technology was beyond anything the old world had achieved. Necessity had driven innovation at an incredible pace. The surface radiation is finally declining, she reported to the council. Her team had been monitoring conditions above 4 years, waiting for the moment when they could safely return to the world they had lost. We can begin small surface operations within the year. Dr. Bowman Kim, the settlement's chief scientist, studied the atmospheric readings. The radiation levels are dropping faster than our models predicted. It's as if the Earth itself is healing. He paused, looking at his colleagues. But we're not the same species that went underground 50 years ago. We've changed, adapted. The changes were obvious to anyone who looked. The children born in the shelters were stronger, smarter, more resistant to radiation. They learned faster and worked together in ways that amazed their elders. The adults had developed an almost supernatural ability to solve complex problems. Under pressure, above them, in the cold vacuum of space, Zeltharian observers made their bets on how long these interesting specimens would persist before joining the billions already dead. "I give them another century at most," wagered junior observer Zekl. "They're impressive, but isolated populations always collapse eventually. Genetic bottleneck, resource depletion, social breakdowns, something will finish them." Athmer was not so sure. "Look at their technological advancement rate," she argued, pulling up comparative charts. "They've achieved in 50 years what most species take centuries to develop. Their fusion reactors are more efficient than ours were at their technological level." Vexthel remained skeptical. "Impressive? Yes. But they're still trapped underground. Like insects. They have no space capability, no way to expand beyond their dying world. They're simply delaying the inevitable." None of the Zeltharians noticed the small, barely detectable energy signatures beginning to appear in Earth's upper atmosphere. They dismissed them as natural phenomena, solar-wind interactions, perhaps, or remnants of old satellites finally decaying. They had no idea that the humans had already begun building something in secret, something that would carry them beyond the boundaries of their wounded world. The survivors had learned to be very good at hiding their true capabilities. The depths of New Soul Shelter. Captain Jiwan Han stared at the blueprints for humanity's first true starship. It would be ready soon. And when it was, the galaxy would discover what happened when you watched a species burn and did nothing to help. The Zeltharians continued their observations, unaware that they were no longer watching a dying civilization. They were watching the birth of something that would remember their indifference forever, 100 years after the burning. The hidden human settlements had transformed into technological marvels that defied Zeltharian understanding. What had started as desperate survival shelters had become gleaming underground cities that stretched for hundreds of miles beneath the Earth's surface. "Impossible," Commander Vextel muttered, studying the energy readings from the planets. "Core." His scaled hands trembled as he adjusted the sensors again and again, unable to believe what he was seeing. "They've achieved stable fusion reactions that exceed our efficiency ratings by 30%. Observer Kethmer leaned over his shoulder, her eyes wide with disbelief. "The power output is beyond anything in our databases. How did they advance so quickly? A century ago, they were barely surviving in caves." She pulled up comparison charts, showing human progress against other species. "This rate of development is unprecedented in galactic history." The monitoring station's AI chimed in with cold mechanical precision. "Analysis confirms. Human technological advancement rate exceeds theoretical maximums by 340%. Recommend immediate field investigation." But the Zeltharians were too proud to admit they might have underestimated a primitive species. They continued to watch from afar, making excuses for what they could not understand. Deep beneath Mount Fuji's ruins, Dr. Taeyeon Kim stood before the massive stellar engineering project that had consumed 20 years of his life. The chamber was enormous, carved from solid rock and lined with materials that seemed to glow with their own inner light. "Project Aurora is ready for testing," he announced to the assembled scientists. His voice echoed in the vast space, filled with excitement and barely controlled fear. The experimental drive system would bend space-time itself, technology born from desperation and fueled by loss. Dr. Yujan Lee, the project's chief engineer, ran final checks on the quantum field generators. "All systems are showing green," she reported. "The theoretical model suggests we can fold space-time in a controlled manner. If this works, we'll be able to travel between stars in days instead of centuries. And if it doesn't work?" asked Dr. Sungmin Choi, the safety coordinator. Taeyeon's expression grew serious. "Then we'll create a crater that reaches the Earth's core." He paused, looking around at his team. But we have to try. Can't remain hidden underground forever. Our people deserve to see the stars again. The drive system was unlike anything that had ever been built. It used principles that the surface world had never discovered. Techniques developed in the desperate years after the war, when humanity had been forced to innovate or die. The underground cities had become laboratories where impossible ideas became reality. Initiating test sequence, Eugene announced. The massive chamber, filled with a low humming sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once, began to shimmer, and for a moment, reality seemed to bend around the experimental device. The test lasted only 3 seconds, but it was enough. When the humming stopped, a chunk of solid rock that had been placed 10 meters away had vanished, only to reappear on the other side of the chamber. "It works," Taeyeon whispered, hardly daring to believe it. "We can actually fold space." In orbit, around Earth, Captain Salman Park commanded the first truly human warship. Its hull forged from metals refined in the fires of their world's destruction. The ship was beautiful in a deadly way, its surfaces gleaming with materials that had been compressed and shaped in the underground foundries. "Ship status report," she called out to her crew. "All systems operational, Captain," replied Engineer Kung Soo Jang. "Fusion reactors at optimal efficiency. Weapon systems charged and ready. Stealth field is holding steady." The ship had been built in secret over 15 years, assembled in hidden orbital facilities that the Zeltharians had somehow failed to detect. It was humanity's first step back into space, armed with technology that had been forged in the depths of the Earth. Long-range sensors are detecting artificial structures at the edge of our solar system. Captain Salman reported to Earth Command through encrypted channels. "Large objects, clearly manufactured. They don't match any known human technology." Navigation. Officer Min Jae Choi enhanced the sensor display, his fingers dancing across holographic controls. The image that appeared made everyone on the bridge fall silent. Massive crystalline structures orbited beyond Pluto, clearly artificial and definitely not human in origin. "Confirmed, Captain. They're not human in origin," Min Jae said quietly. "Someone has been watching us." The discovery changed everything. For 100 years, humanity had believed they were alone in their suffering. Their world had burned in cosmic isolation. But now they knew the truth. Someone had been out there all along, watching their cities burn, recording their agony, and doing nothing to help? "Communications. Can you intercept any transmissions from those structures?" Captain Salman asked. "Already working on it," Captain replied. Signals Officer Ha Young Kim, detecting data streams. It's massive amounts of information being transmitted. To ... somewhere very far away. It looks like observational data. Detailed recordings of everything that happened to Earth. The implications hit everyone at once. They had been watched. Their suffering had been recorded. Their children's deaths had been documented by alien observers who had chosen to remain hidden and do nothing. "Take us back to Earth," Captain Soman ordered, her voice cold with fury. "Command needs to know about this immediately." As the ship turned toward home, nobody spoke. But they were all thinking the same thing. Someone was going to pay for watching their world burn and doing nothing to stop it. The age of hiding was over. The age of vengeance was about to begin. The revelation that humanity had been observed during their darkest hour ignited something cold and purposeful in the survivors' hearts. In the deepest chambers of New Geneva Command, beneath what had once been the Swiss Alps, humanity's leaders gathered around a holographic display showing the alien monitoring stations. "They watched our world burn," Admiral Sun Kong Kim stated. Grimly to the War Council, his weathered face illuminated by the blue glow of the tactical display. "They recorded our children's screams for their archives. They did nothing." The silence in the room was deafening. These were people who had survived the worst catastrophe in human history, who had rebuilt civilization from ashes and radiation. But this knowledge that their suffering had been entertainment for alien observers changed something fundamental inside them. General Minseo Choi leaned forward, her scarred hands gripping the table's edge. "How long have they been watching us?" "Based on the data we've intercepted, at least 200 years, replied Intelligence Director Dong Woo Park. "Maybe longer." They have detailed records of our entire technological development. Every war, every discovery, every moment of progressal, carefully documented and filed away. Dr. Young Seo Lee stood before the assembled military leadership, her presentation filling the air with complex diagrams and energy readings. She had spent 3 years analyzing captured Zeltharian technology, working with fragments recovered from their monitoring stations. Their systems rely on quantum matrices that assume technological stagnation, she explained, highlighting key weaknesses in the alien designs. They've grown complacent over millions of years of unchallenged dominance. Their technology is incredibly advanced, but it hasn't been updated or improved in millennia. Admiral Kim studied the technical analysis. What does that mean for us? It means they're vulnerable, Dr. Lee replied with a cold smile. Their quantum matrices follow predictable patterns. They assume any species they encounter will be thousands of years behind them technologically. They never expected to face opponents who could innovate at our rate. She pulled up comparison charts showing human advancement against Zeltharian development curves. We've achieved in 1 century what took them 10,000 years. Our technology is different from theirs, more flexible, more adaptive, can exploit weaknesses they don't even know exist. Captain Ji-hoon Park had volunteered for the most dangerous mission in human history. His ship, the Shadow of Seoul, was humanity's most advanced stealth vessel. Its hull coated with materials that bent light and absorbed sensor waves. Final systems check complete, reported his engineer, Lieutenant Chow Young Kim. Fusion cores. At optimal efficiency, stealth systems engaged, were invisible to their sensors. The ship slipped away from Earth like a ghost, its revolutionary drive system folding space around it. Within hours, they had traveled farther from home than any human in history. Target acquired. Ji-hoon transmitted back to Earth through quantum-encrypted channels. Zeltharian outpost detected at coordinates Sierra 7. Beginning analysis of their network infrastructure. The alien station was massive, a crystalline structure that gleamed in the light of a distant star. It had been watching and recording for centuries, sending data back to the Zeltharian homeworlds about dozens of different species. Look at this, whispered communications officer Sun-ho Lee as he intercepted the station's data streams. They're not just watching us. They have files on hundreds of extinct civilizations, all species that destroyed themselves after reaching nuclear capability. Ji-hoon felt his blood turn cold as he realized the full scope of what they were facing. They're not just observers, they're collectors. They collect the death screams of entire civilizations. The boarding operation was swift and silent. Ji-hoon's team moved through the station's corridors like shadows, their advanced suits protecting them from the alien atmosphere. The Zeltharian crew never knew what hit them. Intelligence gathered, Ji-hoon reported as his team downloaded terabytes of data from the station's computers. We have their communication protocols, their network topology, and something else, coordinates for every monitoring station in this sector of the galaxy. Across the galaxy, Zeltharian monitoring stations began disappearing one by one, their crews vanishing without distress signals. The humans moved like ghosts, studying their watchers, preparing for something the ancient empire couldn't comprehend. Commander Vextel was reviewing routine reports when the first station went dark. Probably a technical malfunction, he told his staff. Send a maintenance crew to investigate. But the maintenance crew never arrived at their destination. Their ship simply vanished between star systems, leaving no trace behind. 2 more stations have gone offline, Observer Kethmer reported nervously. 8. That's 7 in the past month. This can't be coincidence. Vextel was beginning to feel something he hadn't experienced in centuries. Fear. Could it be the humans? But that's impossible. They're barely capable of interplanetary travel. On Earth, in the hidden command centers deep underground, humanity was preparing for war on a scale never before imagined. Every captured station yielded more intelligence about their watchers. Every analysis revealed new weaknesses to exploit. Phase 1 is complete, Admiral Kim announced to the War Council. We have mapped their entire surveillance network. Their communication systems are compromised. They have no idea what's coming. Dr. Lee smiled coldly as she presented the final weapon. Designs. Phase 2 begins tomorrow. Time to show them what happens when you watch a world burn and do nothing to help. The hunters had become the hunted. But the Zeltharians didn't know it yet. The Zeltharian hegemony's first indication of true danger came when their core worlds began losing contact with outer territories. What had started as isolated communication? Failure spread like a plague across their vast empire, leaving ancient civilizations that had stood for millions of years suddenly cut off from the galaxy. Status report demanded High Commander Zarvex from the bridge of the Imperial flagship. His scaled face showed concern as star charts displayed growing areas of darkness where Zeltharian worlds had once shone bright. 17 core systems have gone silent in the past week, reported Fleet Coordinator Velthara, her voice trembling with disbelief. No distress signals, no emergency transmissions. They simply stopped communicating. Commander Vextal stood before the tactical display, watching as another red dot appeared on the galactic map. Another world lost to whatever force was sweeping through their territory. Deploy the Third Fleet to investigate the Kepler sector, he ordered. Maximum alert status. But the Third Fleet never reached its destination. It was a burst of static, followed by eternal silence. On the bridge of humanity's flagship, Earth's Vengeance, Admiral Yoonji Nam watched the tactical display with cold satisfaction. Around her, the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled moved through space like a pack of predators closing in on their prey. "Admiral, we have visual confirmation of the Zeltharian home fleet," reported Captain Gunwoo Lee from the sensor station. 200 ships, including their command vessel, their holding position around their capital world. Admiral Nam studied the enemy formation. These were the same beings who had watched Earth burn from a safe distance, recording every moment of human suffering for their archives. They had treated the deaths of billions as entertainment, filing away humanity's darkest hour like specimens in a collection. "All ships, this is Admiral Nam." She broadcast to the human fleet. "Remember what they took from us. Remember the children who died while they watched and did nothing. Today we settle that debt." The human ships moved forward, their hulls gleaming. With metals forged in the fires of Earth's destruction, each vessel was powered by fusion reactors born from desperation. Armed with weapons that turned the enemy's own technology against them. "Impossible," Commander Vextel gasped, as his flagship's systems began failing around him. Warning lights flashed throughout the bridge as quantum matrices that had functioned for millennia suddenly turned hostile. "Our technology is millions of years advanced beyond theirs." "Sir, they're using some kind of quantum virus," reported his chief engineer, panic creeping into her voice. "It's rewriting our system protocols from the inside. Everything we built to defend ourselves is being turned into a weapon against us." The Zeltharian commander watched in horror as his own ships began firing on each other, their targeting systems corrupted by human cyber warfare techniques. Vessels that had dominated space for eons suddenly found their weapons. Systems responding to human commands instead of their own. "You watched our world die and did nothing." Admiral Nam transmitted to the surviving enemy vessels, her voice carrying across the void with icy determination. "You treated our suffering as entertainment, recorded our children's screams for your archives while you sat safely in your ships, making bets on how long we would last." The human fleet deployed weapons that exploited fundamental weaknesses in Zeltharian technology. Quantum disruptors tore apart ships by unraveling their basic atomic structure. Energy weapons that fed on the enemy's own power systems, growing stronger with each hit they absorbed. Ships that had dominated space for millennia crumbled like paper before the human assault. The Zeltharians had grown complacent over millions of years of unchallenged dominance, never updating their defenses against opponents who could innovate at humanity's incredible rate. "All ships are reporting system failures," announced Vexel S. Communications Officer. "The humans have somehow corrupted our entire network. Our own technology is attacking us." On Earth, in the deep command bunkers where humanity had survived its darkest hour, Dr. Menyuk Bey watched the final battle unfold through quantum-linked displays. He was elderly now, his hair white and his face lined with age, but his eyes, still burned with the memory of watching his world die, The last Zeltharian stronghold is falling, reported the tactical officer. Their capital world's defenses have been breached. Dr. Bay nodded slowly, remembering the day the bombs fell, and the long years of rebuilding that followed. "Send them our message," he ordered. The final Zeltharian transmission reached Earth moments later. Broadcast from the dying flagship of their once mighty empire, we thought we were watching them die. They were learning to kill gods. As the last Zeltharian world fell dark, its cities burning under human bombardment. Captain Hiram Ko addressed the human fleet from the bridge of her destroyer. Her words were broadcast across the galaxy, a warning to any other species that might be watching from the shadows. "We are no longer the species that begged for mercy beneath a burning sky," she announced, her voice carrying the weight of 100 years of loss and determination. "You're something new, forged in fire, tempered by loss. You have learned what happens when civilizations watch others suffer and choose to do nothing." She paused, looking out at the stars that had once seemed so distant and impossible to reach. "Let the galaxy know those who watch suffering and do nothing will answer for their silence. We are humanity. We remember everything, and we never forgive." The age of the Watchers was over. The age of humanity had begun.